Hey everyone, welcome to Professor Long's Lectures in Anatomy and Physiology. I'm Professor Bob Long. You know why you're watching this video. You're either in my class or you stumbled across it on YouTube. Those of you who are not in my class, this class is intended for those taking my class at Del Mar College, and I'm going to present the information the way I want them to learn it. If you're not in my class, please learn all the details that your instructor goes over. This is not a substitute for your class. If you do find my videos helpful, please hit like and subscribe, and you'll continue to see new videos as I add them, and you can explore my YouTube channel. These videos are not very professionally done in the sense that there's a lot of editing and fanciness. I'm learning how to do all of that, but I don't have the time right now. I have to get these videos up while we're in this coronavirus shutdown. So if I have a cough or something that's goofy, I just have to power through. I'm not editing it out. So they're not real slick, but they are. The information is very simple and basic and straightforward for you to develop a solid fundamental understanding of the concepts, and then we will add some detail later. So if you're in my class, what we've been doing here, let me stay over here because otherwise I end up with these stripes across my face. But what we're doing is we're doing histology. This is the histology lab for lab test 1 if you're in my 2401 class. And I'm going to be going over the epithelial tissues, okay? So you need to watch the histology, the introduction to histology video where I cover epithelial tissues and how they are named, and then the names will make sense to you. Essentially, when we name an epithelial tissue or identify an epithelial tissue, it usually has 2 words in the name and then the word epithelium or epithelial tissue. The first word tells you the cell, the number of cell layers between what we call the basement membrane and the outside world. So if I jabbed a needle through my cheek, there's so many cell layers before I get to the basement membrane underneath the epithelium. If there's 1 layer, we call it a simple epithelium. If there's many layers of cells, we call it a stratified epithelium. Strata means layers. And then there's the cell shapes. The second word in the name of an epithelium tells you the shape of the cell. Squamous cells are flat like little fried eggs. Cuboidal cells are somewhat cube-shaped. They're about as wide as they are tall. They're not always perfect cubes, and they have a round, centrally located nucleus. And then columnar cells are very tall, skinny cells that have an oval-looking nucleus. There are 6 possible tissues that we could look at up to this point. Simple squamous, stratified squamous. Simple cuboidal epithelium, stratified cuboidal epithelium. Simple columnar epithelium, and stratified columnar epithelium. For our lab, we're only going to look at 4 for now. We're going to look at simple squamous, simple cuboidal, simple columnar, and then stratified squamous epithelial tissues. For lab, you have to be able to identify the type of tissue. So, when it comes to the tissues, they're all found on our Canvas page on our anatomy and physiology resources. And in previous videos, I've shown you how to log in. Once you click on this, again, there's some instructional videos on how to study and how to prepare for exams. There's the answers to the lab sheets, the practice sheets, or the lab assignments that are in your lab manual. If you have the latest edition, then those answers should match up. They match up to most of the editions, but a couple of them have been scrambled. Then there's Lab Practical 1, and here's all the images. We list all the faculty here. We have the planes and sections and body cavities and mitosis slides. And then we're going to get down to epithelium. We have a slide of simple squamous epithelium. When I click on that, this is what simple squamous epithelial tissue looks like under a microscope. Now, if you watched my lecture on epithelia, you'll know that simple squamous epithelium is a thin layer of cells. I mean, they're very thin if we look at them from the side, and the basement membrane can be thicker than them. So for this slide, we're looking down on top of the tissues. We're looking down on top of it, so it's not going to look like a single layer of cells. This is a single layer of fried eggs, and underneath it would be a basement membrane, but we can't see it. So if you see this slide on a microscope or on the lab test, this is what it's going to say, identify the type of tissue. And you would say simple squamous epithelium. Okay? This is obviously the nucleus. You can see the cell membrane of each cell, and you can see the cytoplasm. I'm not going to ask for those details. I'm going to assume you know that's the membrane, the cytoplasm, and the nucleus. But this is simple squamous epithelial tissue. One question I could ask on a lab test, please identify the tissue at the pointing. Simple squamous epithelium. Now if I go to the next slide, This is going to be simple cuboidal epithelium. It takes a minute to load. Now, before I go into too much detail, let me just show you this, okay? Cuboidal epithelium lines a lot of tubes, some of the tubes that go to the surface of the body. And those tubes would run down into the body and then coil up. We find them in our kidney tubules. This is a slice of kidney. And so when a tube runs from the surface of the body, this is the outside world. The walls of the tube are the epithelium. So this is the outside world, this empty space where you see light flowing, and we're seeing multiple tubes next to each other, okay? As we slice through those tubes, this is the outside world. This little blue line is the basement membrane, or the basal lamina, that surrounds each little ring of cells. If this is the basement membrane, and that's the outside world, and I have a simple single layer of cube-shaped cells, this would be simple cuboidal epithelium. It usually comes in these little round packets or rings. There are two questions I could ask on a lab test. Please identify the type of tissue at the pointer. The answer is simple cuboidal epithelium. Or identify the blue line at the base of the cells, or that the cells are attached to. That blue line would represent the basement membrane, or you could type in basal lamina. I will accept either answer on my lab tests. So, simple cuboidal epithelium, basement membrane. And this is a secretion that's going to be leaving through the kidney tubules, or some fluid flowing through the kidney tubules. But every one of these rings of cells has a basement membrane around it, a layer of cuboidal cells, and then the outside world. Okay? That's simple cuboidal epithelium and the basement membrane. The next slide we could look at is simple columnar epithelium. Now, simple columnar epithelium is found on these folds that line our digestive tract, And so when we look at those folds, they're running through the digestive tract like this, like these long fingers. If I could slice my finger open, you would see bone and muscle and maybe a little bit of fat, and then the skin. Well, this is that finger. And these are the cells lining the surface of it. It would bend around here and come back down. And then it would come back up like my next finger. So we're looking at the edges of these fingers here, and this is simple columnar epithelium. On this tissue, they did not stain for the basement membrane, but it would be right here between the epithelium and the underlying connective tissue. And as the epithelium and the whole thing folds over, the epithelium continues on this side, so this is all connective tissue. So this layer of cells here and this layer of cells here represents simple columnar epithelium. It's really crammed together, and every cell is very slender, and their nuclei are kind of lined up next to each other, but it's a pretty good view of simple columnar epithelium. There's only one question I can ask on a lab test. Identify the type of tissue at the pointer. The next slide is going to be what we call stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Now again, they did not stain the basement membrane here, but it would be where the dark pink and the light pink meet. This is all connective tissue underneath. This is the outside world, and between the connective tissue and the outside world, there would be a basement membrane right about here, and you can see all these little purple nuclei. Until I tell you otherwise, as far as we know up to this point, every cell has only one nucleus. So if I see many different nuclei, I have multiple cells stacked on top of each other. And as they move to the surface, they flatten out up here. And so if I were to look from the outside and see that, it would be multiple layers of these little fried eggs. So this is stratified squamous epithelium. Again, there's only one question I can ask. Identify the tissue at the pointer. Stratified squamous epithelium. That's it. So those are your 4 slides for the epithelial tissues, okay? Now, when we get to the connective tissues, it's going to be a little bit different. Now, I'm going to have a video where I talk about the connective tissues and I draw them out and we can see them. So, after we do that video, we'll come back to the connective tissues, okay? So, learn the 4 slides of the epithelial tissues. We'll come back to connective tissues in another video. So, I hope you learned something. I hope you had as much fun as I did, and I'll see you in the next video.